She looked me dead in the eye across that dining room table and said, "Frank, I think it's time we had an honest conversation about boundaries." I set down my fork. Slowly. The way my father taught me to do when someone was trying to make you feel small, you never let them see your hands shake. My name is Frank Calloway. I am 67 years old. I spent 31 years building a plumbing and contracting business in eastern Tennessee with nothing but a pickup truck, a tool belt, and the stubbornness God apparently decided to hand out in bulk to men from Harlan County. I have calluses on my hands that will never go away. I have a bad knee from a roof fall in 1998 that I didn't tell my wife about for 2 weeks because we had a crew of 8 depending on that week's paycheck. I have buried my parents, buried 2 friends, and buried a marriage that lasted 22 years. And through all of it, the one thing I never once questioned was my son. His name is Daniel. Danny, when he was small enough to fall asleep on my chest watching football. He has my father's jaw and his mother's eyes, and he grew up knowing exactly how much a dollar cost because I made sure of it. Every summer from age 12, he worked a job site, not playing around actual work. Hauling pipe, mixing concrete, learning to read a blueprint. I didn't do it to be hard on him. I did it because I loved him more than I have ever loved anything in this world, and I believed with everything I had that a man who knows how to work will never be lost. Danny went to college on a partial scholarship and a lot of my money. I didn't complain once. He got an engineering degree, got hired by a firm in Atlanta, and 3 years later, he called me to say he'd met someone. Her name was Courtney Ashford. I want to be fair here because I have had a long time to think about all of this, and I am not a man who believes in painting someone all black or all white. When I first met Courtney, she was polite, smiled at the right moments, shook my hand and said, "Danny has told me so much about you." She was from old Atlanta money. Her father was a corporate attorney. Her mother sat on 3 nonprofit boards, and their home in Buckhead looked like something out of a magazine. They were the kind of people who say charming when they mean quaint and rustic when they mean poor. I notice things. The way a man who has spent 30 years reading job sites notices things. The way Courtney's eyes moved around my house when they came for Thanksgiving, not looking at it, cataloging it. The way she said, "Oh, that's sweet," when I showed Danny the workshop I'd built behind the garage, the same workshop where I'd taught him to use a level and a saw. The way she smiled at her mother on the phone later when she didn't know I was still in the hallway. But Danny was happy. And so I kept my mouth shut. They got engaged in March. The wedding was set for the following October, 14 months away. Courtney's parents were paying for what I can only describe as an event, not a wedding. A venue outside of Chattanooga that hosted 400 guests. A planner who had apparently worked with people whose names I recognized from television. A rehearsal dinner at a restaurant where I genuinely could not identify 3 things on the menu. I was asked to contribute $20,000 toward what Courtney's mother called the groom's family obligations. I wrote the check without a word. I want you to understand that part. I want you, whoever you are watching this right now, to hold on to that detail because what happened later will make a lot more sense when you remember that check. The months leading up to the wedding, I noticed Danny calling less. When he did call, there was something careful in his voice, like a man choosing his steps across ice. He stopped asking about the business. He stopped asking about the guys on my crew, men he had grown up around, men who had come to his Little League games. He started saying things like, "Dad, I just want everyone to be comfortable, and Dad, Courtney's family has a certain way of doing things. And once this one I have not forgotten, Dad, I need you to maybe not bring up the business stuff around her parents. It just creates a certain impression. A certain impression. I am a man who built something. I employed 11 people at my peak. I sent my son to college. I paid my taxes. I paid my bills. I paid into this country for 43 years of working, and my son was asking me to hide that, to tuck it away like something embarrassing so his fiance's parents wouldn't get the wrong impression. I said, "All right, Danny," because I loved him. The wedding weekend arrived. I drove up to Chattanooga alone. I had offered to bring my buddy Raymond, who had known Danny since he was in diapers, but Danny had said the seating was already complicated. I checked into the hotel they had block booked, not the same one as the Ashford family, I noticed, but one about a mile down the road. I pressed my suit. I shined my shoes. I looked at myself in the mirror that Friday morning and I thought, "You look fine, Frank. Your boy is getting married today. That's all that matters." The ceremony was beautiful. I will say that honestly. The venue was a restored mill on a river bend, and the afternoon light came through the old windows at an angle that made the whole room look like it was glowing. I sat in the front row on the groom's side. There was one other person in that row with me, a distant cousin of Danny's mother who I hadn't seen in 8 years. The Ashford side was packed 4 deep. I did not let that land on me. I watched my son stand at that altar, and I thought about the night he was born, the way he grabbed my finger without even opening his eyes, and I felt something so full in my chest that I had to look up at the ceiling for a moment. This is what you work for. This moment. Right here. The reception was where everything changed. We moved to an adjoining hall, marble floors, chandeliers, round tables with arrangements that probably cost more than my first truck. I found my name card. It was at a table near the back, beside the door to the kitchen. Table 14. I counted the tables between me and the head table. 13. I sat down. I introduced myself to the people around me, a colleague of Courtney's from her firm, a college friend of hers I'd never heard of, a couple who turned out to be the wedding photographer's assistant and his girlfriend, there to fill a last-minute gap. Nobody at my table knew who I was. Nobody at my table knew I was the groom's father. I had been seated, on the night of my only son's wedding, at a table where no one knew my name. I am not a man who cries easily. I have maybe cried 4 times as an adult that I can count. But I will tell you that sitting there, straightening the silverware that didn't need straightening, something happened behind my eyes that I had to work very hard to contain. I decided I would find Danny, not to make a scene, just to say hello, to see his face, to maybe get a photograph with him before the evening got too busy. I walked toward the head table during the cocktail hour while the string quartet was playing and people were milling around. I found him near the bar with a group of Courtney's cousins. His face when he saw me, I have replayed this moment more times than I can count. His face went through 3 expressions in about 2 seconds. The first was something like surprise. The second was something I can only call relief that nobody was watching. The third was something I had never seen on my son's face when he looked at me. It was embarrassment. "Dad," he said, stepping slightly away from the group. "Hey, I thought you were at your table. I just wanted to say hello," I said. "You look good, son. I'm proud of you." He nodded quickly. The way you nod when someone is talking too long. "Thanks, Dad. Hey, listen. Courtney's dad is trying to get everyone seated. So, maybe just head back to Daniel." That was Courtney's voice. She came across that floor like she had been waiting for this moment. Her dress was perfect. Her hair was perfect. Her expression, when she reached us, was the particular kind of perfect that takes practice. "Frank," she said, and her voice was warm in the way that marble is smooth. "Can I have a quick word?" She did not wait for my answer. She put her hand lightly on my arm and walked me 3 steps away from the group, and then she dropped the warmth entirely. "I need you to stay at your table for the rest of the evening," she said. "My parents have a very specific vision for how tonight flows, and having you wander around is creating a disruption." I looked at her. "I was saying hello to my son. I understand that," she said, "but there are 400 guests here, and we need everyone to respect the structure. I've already had to redirect you once." I did not know what she meant by that. I had walked from one side of a room to the other. "Courtney," I said, keeping my voice level, "I am Daniel's father. I am not a guest who needs to be managed." Something shifted behind her eyes. She straightened slightly. "With all due respect, Frank," she said, "tonight is about Daniel and me, not about you. And if you can't respect that, then I think it would be better for everyone if you spent the rest of the evening in the hotel. I can have someone validate your parking." I stood there for a moment. The string quartet was playing something I didn't recognize. Around us, 400 people were laughing and drinking and living their lives. My son was 3 feet away, and I could feel him not looking at me. I turned to Danny. I waited until he met my eyes. "Is this what you want?" I asked. He held my gaze for a moment. Just one moment. And then he looked at the floor. "Dad," he said quietly, "maybe it's just easier if you—" "Okay," I said. "Just that. Okay." I went back to table 14. I sat down. The photographer's assistant asked me if I knew where the bathroom was, and I told him it was down the hall to the left. I drank 1 glass of water. I watched my son dance his first dance with his wife from 200 feet away and 13 tables back. Then I folded my napkin, set it on the plate, pushed back my chair. I shook hands with the 2 people at my table whose names I had learned. I walked to the coat check. I got my jacket. I walked out through the front entrance of that venue into the October night air, and I stood on the stone steps for a moment looking out at the river. And I breathed. I did not yell. I did not cry. I did not go back inside. I drove to my hotel. I changed out of my suit. I ordered a burger from room service, and I ate it sitting on the edge of the bed watching a football game I don't remember. And then I did something that might surprise you. I slept. Long and deep and without interruption, the way a man sleeps when he has made a decision he is completely at peace with. Because somewhere between table 14 and those stone steps, something had become very clear to me. Now, before I tell you what happened next, I need to back up and explain something. About 18 months earlier, when Danny had first gotten serious with Courtney and I had started noticing the way the wind was blowing, I had made a quiet visit to my attorney. His name is Gerald Hatch. He's been my lawyer for 20 years. Good man. The kind of man who listens more than he talks. I had built my business up over 3 decades, and 5 years ago I had sold it, not retired, sold it, to a regional company that had been after me for years. I won't tell you the number because that's not what this story is about, but I will tell you it was enough. Combined with the property I owned, the house, the 4 acres behind it, the commercial lot on Route 9 I had been sitting on since 2011, I was comfortable in a way that was not visible from the outside. My truck was 7 years old. My jacket was off the rack. I did not look like what I was. In that meeting with Gerald, I had made some changes to my estate documents. Nothing angry, nothing reactive, just clear. The kind of clarity a man gets when he starts paying attention. I drove home to Tennessee the morning after the wedding. It was a Sunday. The leaves were past peak, but still holding some color, and I had the windows down most of the way because the air smelled like something I needed. I did not call Danny. I did not call anyone. I went home, walked the property, had dinner, and went to bed. He called on Tuesday. The phone rang at 8:14 in the morning. I was on the back porch with my coffee. "Dad," he said. His voice was different from the wedding. Flatter. Something pressed out of it. "Danny, Courtney and I are back from the honeymoon. We need to talk." I waited. "We've been discussing our financial situation," he said, "and we're thinking about buying a house. In Atlanta. In a particular neighborhood." A pause. "It's a significant purchase." "I imagine it is," I said. "We were hoping," he said, and I could hear him pulling the words out carefully, "that you might be willing to help with the down payment. Given your situation. Given your situation." 3 weeks after his wife walked me out of his wedding reception, my son was calling to ask for money. I took a long sip of my coffee. A hawk was working the tree line at the back of my property. I watched it bank and disappear. "How much?" I asked. He told me. It was not a small number. "I see," I said. "Can I ask you something first, Danny?" "Sure," he said. "Do you remember what you said to me at the reception when Courtney asked me to leave?" Silence. "You said, 'Maybe it's just easier, Dad.' Do you remember that?" More silence. "I just want to make sure we both remember it the same way," I said, "because I do. I remember it very clearly." "Dad," he said, and his voice had shifted into something I recognized, the tone of a man who has been coached on what to say. "Courtney and I both know that evening was complicated, and we're hoping we can all move forward. We don't want to dwell on—" "Danny," I said quietly, "I love you. I have loved you every single day of your life. I will love you until I'm in the ground, and probably after." "Dad." "I'm not finished," I said. "I need you to listen to me right now the way I listened to you your whole childhood. Are you listening?" He was quiet. "I am not going to help with the down payment," I said. "And I need you to understand that this is not about the money, and it is not about Courtney, and it is not about one bad night. This is about the fact that I sat at table 14 at your wedding. This is about the fact that you looked at the floor." I heard him exhale. "Everything I have built," I said, "I built with the idea that it would matter to the people I love. I never built it to be a resource. I never built it to be a fund you could access when it was convenient and ignore when it wasn't." "That's not fair," he said. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" I said. "Help me understand." He didn't answer right away. And in that silence, I heard something I hadn't heard in a long time. I heard my son, the real one, not the one Courtney had been carefully reconstructing. I heard him breathing on the other end of the phone the way he used to breathe when he was a kid, and he knew he'd done something wrong and was trying to figure out how to say it. "I don't know what you want from me, Dad," he said finally. His voice had cracked just slightly, just at the edge. "I want you to know that I love you," I said. "And I want you to know that love is not the same as a blank check. And I want you to know that when you're ready, really ready to talk, I will be here. I am always going to be here. But I am not going to be managed. And I am not going to be moved to table 14. And I am not going to pretend that none of this happened so that everyone can be comfortable. I am 67 years old, and I have earned the right to be honest." I heard him swallow. "I have to go," he said quietly. "I know," I said. Take care of yourself, son. I set the phone down on the arm of the chair. The hawk came back out of the tree line and made another pass over the field. I watched it until it was gone. 7 months passed. I am not going to tell you those 7 months were easy. I am not going to stand here and act like a man who has been separated from his only child doesn't feel it. There were Sunday evenings that were very long and very quiet. There were moments in my workshop when I'd pick up a tool and think about showing Danny something, and then remember. I kept myself busy. I fished more than I ever had. I helped Raymond rebuild his deck. I drove up to visit my sister in Virginia for a week in February. I kept going. In April, Danny called. Not to ask for anything, just a call. He called on a Thursday evening, and when I answered, he said, "Hey, Dad." And something in his voice was different again, quieter, stripped back down to something real. We talked for a while about nothing important, the weather, a team we both followed, a memory he'd had about a job site we'd worked together when he was 17. He laughed once, a real laugh, the kind that happens before you can think about whether it's appropriate. And then he said, "I owe you an apology. I've been trying to figure out how to say it." I didn't rush him. I think I convinced myself, he said slowly, that because Courtney's family had a certain way of doing things, that was the way things were supposed to be. And I think I let that become more important than it should have. Then a lot of things should have been, I said, not unkindly. Yeah, he said. Then a lot of things. What changed? I asked. A long pause. We went to dinner at her parents' house last month, he said. And her dad spent the whole evening talking to his partners on the phone, in the dining room, while we were eating. And Courtney just sat there like it was normal. And I kept thinking, he stopped. Started again. My dad never once took a phone call at the dinner table. Not once. Not in my whole childhood. I didn't say anything. Ask. I don't know if that makes sense, he said. It makes sense, I said. I'm sorry, Dad, he said. I'm really sorry for the table. And for looking at the floor. His voice broke slightly. That was wrong. That was wrong, and I knew it, and I did it anyway, and I am sorry. I sat with that for a moment. I know you are, I said, and I forgive you. I want you to hear that clearly. I forgive you, Danny, because you are my son, and that is simply the end of the sentence. He didn't speak for a moment. But I also need you to know, I said, that forgiveness doesn't automatically mean everything goes back to how it was. We're going to have to build something new, something honest. And that's going to take time. And it's going to require you to make some decisions about what you actually value, not what's expected of you. What you value. I know, he said. And I'll be here for all of it, I said. Every step. That part never changed. We talked for another hour. When we hung up, I went out to the back porch and stood there in the April air and looked out over my 4 acres, at the workshop where I'd built things, and the tree line where the hawk lived, and the property that was mine because I had worked 43 years for it. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not victory, not satisfaction. Those are thin feelings for a thing this big. What I felt was something more like mourning. The way mourning feels when you've been awake through a very long night, not because the trouble is over, but because the light is back and you can see where you're standing. Danny and I have spoken every week since then. We are finding our way. It is not perfect. Courtney and I are not close, and I will not pretend we ever will be. But she called me in June, not Danny, her, and she said, "Frank, I think I owe you something." And she said it plainly, without warmth and without performance. And I respected her more for that than I had for all the practiced politeness of the year before. I don't know what the future holds. I never did. I'm 67 years old, and I've stopped pretending that I get to know how things end. But I know this. The night I walked out of that wedding venue and stood on those stone steps and breathed the October air, I did not lose anything. I was very clear about what I was and what I had built and what I was willing to accept. That clarity, that is not something anyone can see at table 14. My father used to say that the most expensive thing in the world is losing yourself trying to keep someone else's approval. He said it to me when I was 19 years old, and I thought I understood it. I was 40 years off. If you're sitting somewhere watching this right now, and you know this feeling, if you know what it is to love someone completely and feel that love used as a given instead of a gift, I want you to hear me say something that I mean with everything I have. You are allowed to stay, and you are allowed to leave, and you are allowed to forgive. And none of those things require you to pretend the table number didn't hurt. Hold on to what you built. Hold on to who you are. The people who are worth it will eventually find their way back to that. Danny did. And on the nights when it's quiet and I'm out in the workshop, sometimes I hear his truck coming up the driveway. And every single time, I put down what I'm doing and I go to the door.